Welcome to Off the Shelf. I'm your host, Yvonne Wolf. Today, our special guest is award-winning poet and author Michael Maul. Breaking Cover is his third publication and poetry collection. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
We know that you attended the Glenview Library's meet and greet for local authors last year. So glad that you were able to meet our Glenview residents.
Yeah, it was terrific, and I was able to meet other writers that live in Glenview, and then also people who are interested in literature and reading. So they made room in the hallway for when you come in to the library, and provided tables, and were just gracious hosts. So it was an opportunity for us to talk to each other as writers and to talk to people who are consumers of writing.
And Breaking Cover is your third collection of poetry. How long have you been writing?
Well, I've been writing for about 50 years, and that's 50. So I started when I was when I was a junior in high school, and I'm still writing today.
And that's a long career. Yeah, it's nice to know that you were able to keep up with this. But did you have any encouragement, or what kind of opportunities did you have during college?
Well, there's two good questions. One of them, one answer is that yes, I was encouraged at home because my mother was very literary and read a lot, and also wrote poetry too. But she was raising kids, and had to find time, and raising her husband really. While all the things that she had to do, she wasn't able to devote the time I was able to devote to it. So that is where some encouragement came from. When I started in college at Ohio University in Athens, Ohio, I thought I was going to be a journalist, but instead I got on the newspaper for the university, and I ended up writing poetry. So I was like, well, we need somebody to do the journalism. So I just went the poetry route, liked it a lot, got a lot of feedback from poems that were being published, had a chance to meet some phenomenal poets who would come through the different universities and give speeches.
Yes.
And it all felt good to me.
And you were able to meet them, and what were those conversations like?
Well, we were probably, myself and maybe 5 other students were maybe 21 years old.
Yes.
And the people that came in to speak to us from their wisdom, we thought they were 100 years old.
Yes,
but they were probably 50,
right.
but it was very, very nice, and we could get just straight commentary for what it's like to write poetry and what you do. I learned a lot about that. One of the people I was talking to, I was trying to give myself a pat on the back to one of these famous poets. And I said, when I started writing, I didn't understand how broad poetry can be. I would just write about love and life and death, but there's so much more that can be done. Mm. And he just looked at me and he goes, well, what else is there? I'm like, well, yeah, it's love and life and death, and those sorts of things. Right. So anyway, that was good. I got a little bit of comeuppance there, which was fine.
Who were some of these famous poets?
Robert Penn Warren was one of them. And he'd actually been born in like a log cabin on the border between Ohio and Kentucky. Ended up winning a Pulitzer Prize and being celebrated. And just others that really don't come to mind at this moment. But we saw that you could have a life in academia, and that you can write and have a family, and this is what you do. and I just thought it was a wonderful idea.
Yes, what a good plan, right?
Mhm.
Oh. Now, how did you decide on the cover of this one? Now, we'll take this one first.
Okay. Well, the cover, which I think is over my shoulder here, is for breaking cover, is a bird that's taking flight, and it's actually a photo that I took. I usually take photographs for my covers, and what I wanted to do in the third collection of poetry was be sure that I was honest with myself and honest with my readers and honest with my poetry, because too often a poet can hide behind voices and what's going on, and while it may be pleasant to read, it just doesn't have the heartbeat and the marrow in it that you want in a real poem. So I thought I'm going to be honest about as I can possibly be in writing it. So breaking cover was a chance of me kind of breaking my cover and that extra distance. What is it when you're a actor or an actress? They have like the third wall or fourth wall or whatever it is. So that I took all of that down, and I think I achieved what I wanted to. I was very, very happy with that. The other thing is that when something breaks cover, it kind of explodes in front of you, and people are startled. And I thought that's what I want in a poem. I want to startle readers. I don't want them just reading a poem that goes da 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 da. I want it to be a real experience that shocks them and surprises them and captures them.
That kind of level of engagement that you feel startled by it. I see. Wow, that's very meaningful. Now, I know that you have other works. One that is called, is it Dancing?
Yeah, Dancing Naked in Front of Dogs.
That's right. That cover is
That cover.
very
And that is not a
intriguing.
photograph of me on the cover. But,
No.
somebody asked me that because it's actually a dancer's legs
Yes.
from the back. But yeah, that was
Did you take that picture too?
I did not.
Okay.
But it was kind of a breakout collection for me, and really earned a lot of attention in the United States, but especially in Ireland and in England, and other places in Europe. It was republished in India and in
Wonderful.
Japan. So it was great to see that it had kind of a worldwide
Appeal,
audience,
yes.
at least for that. Not in huge numbers, but being able to have a thought, write it, put it out there, and someone else care enough about it to get back to you about it
Right.
is very special.
Must be very rewarding. Now you mean it was translated to
Yes.
other languages? I always think that is hard to do, especially with poetry. Translations are it's so much about word choice.
You're exactly right. There has to be a lot of decisions made, and they all are very closely shaved sorts of things. So you may end up with a translation that is 75% of what you were saying in the native tongue,
Right, right.
but losing 25% is tough for a writer.
Yes, it is, isn't it?
Yeah.
So did you have any input in that? Because sometimes I hear authors have no input. It just runs through a kind of a machine, and then did you have any input?
I
or did
didn't.
they- okay,
No,
did not
I did
discuss
not.
it?
It was handled by publishers.
Yes, I see. I see. Well, that is quite an accomplishment to be internationally received, right? I
Yeah.
think that's beautiful.
Thank you.
Now, your book is organized into 4 themes. Now, how did you decide on the themes?
Yeah.
Did you have these 4 themes originally, and then you just started to categorize them, or have you been writing on these 4 themes for a long time? Which came first, I guess?
It's a good question. Another good question. what I wanted to do was write a full collection of poetry. And generally, that's somewhere between 75 and 100 poems. And I took a year to write that book. And I thought I'm going to write the best poems that I can write, and then I'm going to look for commonality among them and see how they kind of
Right.
separate themselves. So that's what I did. I didn't start with saying I want to have this chapter and this chapter and this, and then push them that way. I wanted to see how I would kind of break them out. So some of the poems were more emotional, I guess, and maybe more love-based, I think, whether that's family or whatever. And those, it was easy to see where those went. Some of them were commenting on the life we all live together here. And it had to do with school shootings and that sort of thing. That's not a very pretty topic,
No.
but it's a real topic.
Yes.
And it's happening, and how can it be?
It's difficult to address.
It is, and one of the poems I wrote ended up being picked up by National Public Radio poetry group. So that got some national experience too. And the title was Starter Angels, because I thought these little kids have been killed, and they had to be angels now.
Yeah.
But I just want to bring some perspective back to it and remind everybody that hiding under your desk and putting your hand up like this isn't going to be the solution to stopping this.
Yeah.
So I waded into some of those sorts of things. So that became another group, not really news-based, but situational.
Yes, yes. It's
and-
on so many people's minds. We can't not think about it, but we
Yeah.
don't know how to stop it. And then
No,
So-
but what I thought I could do is I can write about it. And when I write about it, and I now, unfortunately, I've written about 3 different school shootings. And every time the poem's a little bit different. But it's also kind of sickening because it's also the same. So I think the names have to be put out there. The situation needs to not be closed off, and something has to happen. But I'm just the poet guy. I don't have to solve that.
yes, but it's a lot of emotions that we can perhaps not uncomfortable, but deal with it through poetry because there's just so much emotions there.
Yeah, you can.
So many.
And then a third area, as far as the chapters and the poems getting organized, just had to do with the writing experience. So if you're a writer or writing poems, it talks about the poems communicate what it's like to be writing or frustrated or second thinking what you've written and those kinds of things. So that's a long answer for your very bright and brief question, which was how did these 4 chapters get selected?
Yes. Well, I can see that you already touched on my next question. You foresee the next question is the value of writing. What is the value of writing?
Well, there's a lot of ways to assess value.
Exactly.
And of those answers, many of them don't have anything to do with anything else. I can tell you what it's not. It's not a good way to make money. It's not a good way to buy a new car. But you don't have much choice with it. You become part of a community, and that's big.
Yes.
So when you meet people that have the same strange thoughts that you do, or are able to write about something from a perspective, and this happens all the time to me from other poets, that I wouldn't have thought to write of, and vice versa, we enrich each other and admire each other's work. So that's the value of it for me, is finding more people like myself who appreciate what I do, because for most people, poetry is the topic comes up and say, let's talk about poetry. Everybody grabs their golf clubs and leaves, you know. I mean, nobody's
You
too...
mean it's not a crowd
No,
pleaser?
no. It's shocking, I know. But it's not too easy to find people that care about that. But the few that hang around and the few that do, we become lifelong friends, really, especially many of my friends in Florida who are great writers and then became great friends. We found more about each other's lives and things. So
I would say building community connections is invaluable. Now that
it is.
kind of connection is something that I don't think social media can take place of. You know, there is a connection between people that that's very precious.
I have a lot. Well, I have a lot of readers in Canada for some reason, in Toronto for some reason, and other places there, and we send. I will get emails from them just saying, "I loved how you said this. I loved how you said that. I can't believe," and that feels good because it's too simple to beat yourself up over something that you're struggling with, and you have to remind yourself that you can do these things. But sometimes it's good to have somebody say, "You know what? I really, really like what you did, and it made a difference to me."
Yeah.
So that's a value to me.
That's yes, that's very important in our society where things go by so fast, and we don't really know how to process or express it in the most productive ways. You know, I see that happening in all about 90% of the things we read hasn't been processed or processed. It hasn't been composed. It just gets sent out there. Well, I guess what you said about not a good way to make money. I find that there's a funny joke between my friends and me is that I'm very good at picking things that don't make money. But there's just so many things in life that we could be engaged in building and communicating.
Yeah.
So now this book is self-published, but you mentioned the other ones were by a publisher who took it off.
Well, I've done both.
Yes,
I've
so
done
tell
both.
us about that choice and that experience.
Yeah, I've published in literary publications, magazines, and anthologies more in Europe than in the United States, and I mentioned some of the countries that do that, and I think Ireland for me is a country that's just based on poetry. Very literate. The language is beautiful, and so that is a group that we write for. Now, they already have the publications there. They've been around for 100 years, and you have to submit poems to them, and they go through and choose what they're going to publish, and that becomes their book. So this is important because it's an economic system in a way. And I'm not saying anything criticizing at all, but it's just the way it works. So they put out a call, to make it simple, to everybody who's a poet in the world to send their poems.
It's a competitive process.
And they charge you for it. So you have to pay to have your poems sent in and read. And then they choose whatever those are going to be and publish it in their publications, which are revered. And a bit of success comes with that. You don't get any more money at this time. So it comes out. I think self-publishing makes it much, much easier. Well, easier is probably the wrong word. It makes it more streamlined because I can write my poems, I can edit my poems, I can revisit my poems, and then I can work with Amazon or something like that, and they will do the printing of it and the marketing of it, and take some of the proceeds, and the majority would stay with me. So I don't know. It's interesting to me because it's like an old way of thinking and a new way of thinking. Mm-hmm. The old way of thinking is the way that things have been published forever. Yes. And the problem is, back in the day, you had to sit down at a typewriter and type it. And many of these publications say that we don't send us your poems or you send them anywhere else. You just have to send them to us. We need to see those poems and no one else can consider them. They take about 2% of the 98% of the poems they receive.
Wow.
So you've wasted all the time waiting to hear back from them, mm-hmm. which can take 5 or 6 months. Wow. And you can't be a writer like yes. that.
Right.
You need to be writing your own stuff, editing your own stuff, mm-hmm. and then publishing your own stuff from my standpoint.
I see. I see the advantages, and that's something our audience might want to weigh for mm-hmm. themselves when they're heading this direction.
Yeah, it doesn't automatically mean you're going to write well because you're writing your own stuff. Sometimes it's good to have an editor out there. Yes. But, you can be tough about those things and make your decisions. So that's what I do now.
I see. Now, what was one difficulty? Now, this is back to breaking cover. Now, what was one difficulty you didn't foresee when we talk about self-publishing and being your own editor?
Mm-hmm. I guess the one thing I didn't understand is that it would never be done. Because anytime I sat down and look at it, mm-hmm. I would edit my own work.
Yes.
Maybe not better, maybe not worse, maybe just the same, I don't know. But I can barely read anything that I've written that I wouldn't look at it because I change mm-hmm. from year to year, yes. where I would say this way instead of that way. But it's okay, yeah.
You have to be more forgiving, or?
Well, yeah, you do. Sometimes you definitely do because, as I said, a lot of people are not interested in poetry. I can tell you who my audience is. My audiences are women 70 plus. And
really?
That's who buys poetry, who reads poetry, who is involved in poetry. I'm part of writing groups.
So you're a young guy in this community.
I like the way you think. I'm going to file that away. I feel younger every day. So yeah, that's who the audience is. The men are like 25%, mm-hmm. and they're probably lying about reading poetry, would be my guess anyway.
But I find poetry so valuable in the way for processing feelings, emotions.
It is.
And who is a better audience than men?
That's good. Yeah, well, they just need to, read more of it. But women are great with emotions, and and subtle inferences, and they're able to take all of that in. And here we are just making these categoric assumptions based on gender, which is not really true.
Right.
But
yes.
But fun to talk about.
Yes, certainly. When we're given these statistics and we try to explain mm-hmm. what phenomena, that's far more personal and can change every day how they mm-hmm. react to our work. How good are you at doing social media? Are you doing that marketing yourself on your website? I've seen.
Yes, yeah, I am, and before I retired, which was 10 years ago, I worked in public relations, so I had clients like Procter & Gamble and mm-hmm. Bigger companies, and I got them started in social media, and I learned, kind of went to school on social media so I could understand that better. And I was able then to take those skills and translate them to what I do. So, I have my poems, I have a poetry group online. I have really opportunities for people to come in and have conversations with me or read things that I've written. And it's simple when you have a website to just keep backfilling on what you've done, and you end up with a tremendous amount of material on there, actually.
That's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, so I understand that a bit.
Wonderful. You keep on learning and using the different venues and platforms. Well, what advice do you have for our writers out there? What one message you have for them?
Well, can I give you two messages?
Yes, you can
Okay.
give two.
Good. Well, one of them, I think, is to understand that writing is difficult, and not from an emotional standpoint even, but you have to put down your first draft, and then when you read it again with new eyes, you realize this part is part of another poem that's not even out there. So you focus on that. You read more poetry so you can see what contemporary poetry is being published like, and you can understand, you don't write a 10-page poem anymore.
Right. Yeah.
Less is better. So those are things that you need to understand if you're going to write for yourself, because you're going to edit for yourself too.
Yeah. And the second thing, second message?
Well, the second thing is everything is important to us because they come from our hearts, but that doesn't mean it's going to be important to everybody else. So I think it's to, I had somebody contact me about this, and that was they wanted to start writing, but they wanted to write their family history. And I said, good luck. And it's very dangerous because
Why is that?
it seems easy to you because you knew your mother, you knew your grandparents, you knew whatever, and you just do that. But that doesn't automatically become good writing or poetry. What you're just doing is logging in things that happened. But good poems have two places where they start. There's the initial beginning, and then later in the poem, that rotates into a second poem. And that's really where it happens. So you might have somebody doing this, talking to you, and all of a sudden, you get this flash, and that's the moment. That's the moment. It's the poetic moment. You can't really get that if you're just listing who relocated to America or when or what they did, because a lot of people aren't going to care about it. And those that do care about it will probably take issue with whatever you said about the family. So
that's a fascinating way to understand writing.
You've got to keep your creativity in it.
So Michael, what connects you to Glenview?
What connects me to Glenview is my family, and my daughter came to go to college. She found her husband, met her husband there. Yeah. Now we have grandkids. So
and they live in Glenview?
They do. Well, no, they don't. They live just outside Glenview.
I see.
And so that's why we moved up here.
Wow. So that's been a wonderful decision for your family.
Yeah. It has been.
Well, thank you, Michael, for joining us.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching. Join us next time on Off the Shelf.